But just last month, the agencies that were supposed to release their review actually said in their statement, please read our website and look at the 4 alternatives we have, because those are the alternatives. Please study them, blah, 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 blah. So they know what they're going to be doing, and we've kind of known for a long time too, because we've read all the documents. And thanks to a number of people in this group, in the Airport Marina group and Grassroots Coalition, there are a number of people who've been doing public records requests that have helped us get that information and be able to review it. So we really do know what's going on, and it's time for the public to know. So we're going to talk about the Ecological Reserve, and that is bordered by the 90 Freeway, Fiji Way, the community of Playa del Rey, and the Bluffs and Lincoln Boulevard. It's kind of an interesting configuration of what we were able to protect, and some of the people here in this room, like Rex Frankel, Kathy Knight, were involved, like Jeanette said, 20-some years ago, and at that time it was really not seen that we could even protect more than 240 acres. Everybody said that was the most, that was the deal that had been done, sit down and go do something else. Well, a lot of people, myself included, said no, it's not enough, and so the 640 acres is what we finally were able to achieve in 2003, 2004. And it's not everything, but there is an amazing amount of wildlife there. So I want to thank the Airport Marina Group for inviting me so we can talk about this. One of the things that I think is most important is to note that this is not just a wetland. It's the Ballona Wetlands Ecological Reserve. And the Ecological Reserve is really a mosaic of a number of different kinds of habitats that were along our coast in Southern California and really are not in very many places left. Even the wetlands that are down in San Diego County, which a lot of people talk about and try and use as an example, most of them really are only wetlands. But we are really fortunate that so many people in the community said that's not enough, and we were able to protect more than just what people think of as tidal wetlands. And so here, for instance, is one of the historical sloughs called Centinela Slough. This is the waterway that started up in Inglewood and with artesian wells, and still to this day, there's a Centinela Creek that comes from the park up at Edward Vincent Park and comes down to the Ballona Wetlands. And this is a slough that some of the people who want to dig up Ballona and have this big plan, they don't even realize that this is here, I think, because this is what they say they want to make. There also are a number of wet meadow areas that are seasonally wet. Sometimes that means every year, sometimes it means every 7 or 8 years. Like this year, we will have a lot of wet meadows by the end of March, I would predict. And we also have seasonal ponds. The seasonal ponds are important for migratory birds, for frogs, for dragonflies, and so it's more rain-fed wetlands. There's also coastal sage scrub in a number of areas where the California gnatcatcher now actually comes occasionally, and we could bring it back as a nesting species. So this habitat's also really important. The seasonal ponds, like this particular one, this one kind of came out of being a horse corral for a while, way back in the 60s, 70 years ago. But it's really functioning as an interesting ecosystem now. Not only important for migratory birds, frogs, dragonflies, but in the dry season when the pelican's not there or other birds, there are actually a number of ground nesting bees that make their home underneath the soil. So it's a really important ecosystem into itself. Then we have beautiful grasslands and meadows, like this Yerba Mansa meadows, one of my favorite areas. The Yerba Mansa was a a medicinal plant used by the Native Americans, and the meadow there has actually been expanding for some time, and it's really a beautiful area. And then we have the salt pans, which this salt pan area is on all the historical maps from a very long time ago, and it's a landscape feature that attracts a lot of the migratory birds during this season. So what are the plans? Well, the plans are to essentially erase this mosaic of habitats and to focus on one kind of habitat, a tidal, full tidal wetland fed by the ocean. The problem with that is that the ecologists who have studied this area have said that is not what was here. So, and that also, interestingly, the species that are here tell us that that's not what is here because they're mostly freshwater brackish species. And our coastline was not open to the sea year-round. It's kind of a misunderstanding, maybe fed by the fact that a lot of the consultants that do this work come out of San Francisco, where the bay is open to the sea year-round. It's really the only area on the whole coast, San Diego as well, but otherwise, most of the areas were not open to the sea year-round. And I'm going to put this little asterisk here. These watercolor drawings may not be representative of the final plans. Now I'm saying that because on the website where they tell you to go look at the plans, it does say that very clearly. But this is what they want you to believe they're going to do. So what are the plans? Alternative one is what they call a naturalized creek. And I'll show you the other version of it. Now the problem is that's not what a naturalized creek would have looked like in this area. Now in Culver City, you can actually go to Culver City now and you'll see the area that has got a completely concrete lined area. And it is sinuous like that. It's very curvy, but it wouldn't have been that way here. By the time a river gets out close to the ocean, it's more like a distributary, or like your fingers going out with lots of different little meandering sloughs. So this is, and we know that this drawing, originally this whole idea was actually put together by someone who's a landscape architect, not a geographer, not a biologist, not a hydrologist, but somehow they've all sort of decided they're going to go along with this, even though it's not historically what was there, and it's not really a naturalized creek. So alternative two is a partial naturalized creek. And what they mean by that is they're going to make it curvy a little further east than in the other one. I'll go back to number one again. You can see they go in earlier. And this one is further up. So a partial naturalized creek. And that's what they say. Now, interestingly, the way they've drawn it, it kind of looks like everything else is brown, and they've forgotten, again, about all these other wetland areas that we have right now. And then, alternative three is the Area A oxbow. Now, Area A is this part right here. It's to the north of Ballona Creek, and it's to the west of Lincoln Boulevard. It's about 140 acres. And that's the part where you will hear repeatedly, well, there's all this fill and dredge spoil on top of it. And actually what it is marsh mud, because when they were dredging out the marina to build it, they had to figure out a place to put it, and they were looking everywhere and saying, look, I'll give you some money if you'll put it somewhere. And Howard Hughes was around and said, you know, yeah, you can put it on top of here. Well, just pay me, whatever. And so it basically was it wasn't even dug out and put on top. It was like through a big pipe, is what I understand. So the mud that's there, it's actually been about 60 years now, 55, 60 years, and so there's an equilibrium there. And what happened is they just made the wetland higher, which actually is not a bad thing when you think about sea level rise and some of the concerns we might have in the future. Maybe it's good to have a little higher area. Plus, I'll be telling you a little bit more of why we think that doing this Area A oxbow is not such a good idea. But you can see there are some people who think that this is the one that will end up being a preferred alternative by the California Department of Fish and Wildlife, partly because they have concerns about the endangered Belding savanna sparrow, which is on the state endangered species list, and they think that that's only to the south of Ballona Creek. However, if they've read any of the surveys by Belding savanna sparrow experts, they will know that Area A is also a very important area for the Belding savanna sparrows when they disperse after nesting. So, back again to the disclaimer, these watercolor drawings may not be representative of the final plans. However, what we do know is that they have submitted a multi-million-dollar engineered plan to the Army Corps of Engineers that backs up Alternative 1. So, and it was, like I said, multi-million dollars worth of money went into that. Your bond money, the bond money we all voted for, that was supposed to be for acquiring or restoring the Ballona Wetlands, not for planning the Ballona Wetlands. They've spent about $15 million on planning and engineering drawings so far. So, in addition, here are some of the details we've learned. All three alternatives include extensive excavation, bulldozing, clearing, and grubbing everywhere, even in the areas they aren't going to do anything. And as Jonathan has, one of our naturalists who's here and whose photographs are part of this beautiful presentation, he came up with this great term. It's really an industrial habitat alteration. And if you look at the engineering drawings, that is what it is. All three of them also would have a 3-story concrete parking lot constructed where the Coastal Commission said the parking lots that were put along Fiji Way for the Olympics in 1984 were supposed to be returned to wetlands. And it hasn't happened yet because the county currently leases those out, first from Playa Vista, now from the state. So that's another part of their project. All three alternatives include trapping and caging of thousands of wild animals, because when you ask the question, what are the animals going to do? Well, the birds will fly away, they say. And then you say, well, what about all these other animals? Well, we're going to trap them and cage them, and we have a plan for that. And I don't know how they think they're going to do that, but maybe we need Pamela Anderson here to help stop that. Destruction of many populations of native plants and burrows. One of the things I want to make sure is put across is that so much of the life at Ballona in the Ecological Reserve is beneath the surface. Many of the species that we see in the beautiful photographs that Jonathan and Rick and others put out, they're not always visible. Well, that's because they live below the surface or in the bushes, and there are lots of places where you don't see them, but they are there, and they would be gone with this plan. And all three alternatives also include improving the infrastructure so that the Playa del Rey gas storage field can continue. You all heard about Porter Ranch? We have a little bit smaller size of a similar gas storage facility right here underneath the Ballona Wetlands. And we don't think they should be improving the infrastructure. We think they should be closing it down because it is also as an antiquated storage method like the one up at Aliso Canyon. And it's 30 years older, in fact. So the valves and the pipes that they're having problems with up there, they have had problems here too. And we know about some of them. and some of them we don't know about. And some of them could end up being as bad as the problems up in Porter Ranch. In addition, all three alternatives also include demolition of the current bicycle path on the north levee of Ballona Creek and reconstructing it and putting it all around Fiji Way. So it would, like, if you are, like I know Rick used to ride his bike from Delray to his work, and he would get probably another 15 or 20 minutes put on that ride if they changed it the way they're planning. So that, I think, will also cause some concerns. And demolition of at least a portion of Ballona Creek earthen levees, allowing polluted water that comes down the creek, which hasn't been cleaned up yet. At times it's healthy for wildlife, but not necessarily healthy for all wildlife. And we've had many oil spills and sewage spills during the times that I've lived here in Playa del Rey, and I don't think we want that going into the wetlands. And it would also allow saltwater in 100% of the time, and that would be detrimental for a number of the species as well. And that's not enough. All three species would, or all three alternatives would include construction of these huge 20 to 30 feet berms. Now, on one of them, they all would have berms going up high along Fiji Way, and so the alternatives 1 and 2 would also have these berms very high along Culver and Jefferson, so if you're driving by, you really would lose your view of the wetlands and any of the beauty that you see there now. Why? Because they would be taking out the creek levees, which currently are there to minimize flood damage. So they would have to do these berms around the edges instead in order to still have the flood control. So it's they say, well, we're going to make some nice trails on top of them, and we're going to do this and that, but it's a lot of work and a lot of money. And then finally, alteration of the Ballona Creek Channel, which is a recreational rowing area. And the people I know who row there say they want to row straight, not like this. So that's also a problem. Now, here's alternative 4, the fine print. Now, the alternative 4 is where they say, well, if you don't like any of these, you'll get a no project alternative. That's alternative 4, and they have to do that according to the environmental laws. However, if you read it carefully, you see where they've got kind of a little, I don't know if blackmail's the proper word to use, but incentives, shall we say. If you don't do this, we're going to give you a no project, and then the existing restricted access to the Ballona Reserve would continue. In other words, we're not going to let the public really have any trails because you have to do our version of this otherwise. You also wouldn't get a parking structure. Well, maybe not the kind we want is what they have. And Southern California Gas would continue to manage the wells and pipelines within the Ballona Reserve and would independently pursue their wells and pipeline abandonment. Maybe we want that. So you have to read the fine print to see. And maybe we want an alternative 5 that isn't even any of these. So what's the problem? I've told you some of them, but here are some real basics. The plans are based on false premises. First, Ballona Creek is supposed, they think, and they claim that Ballona Creek is supposed to be curved like a river upstream is, but it's not. It never was. Rivers are not that way when they get close to the ocean. Second, their premise is that there are no meandering sloughs or streams in the Ballona Wetlands Ecological Reserve, and there are actually several. And you don't have to dig everything up in order to let nature do that. And in fact, nature has made these meandering streams over thousands of years. They also claim that Ballona Creek is just a concrete channel with no life, and it's not. Now in Culver City it is, but when you get closer especially west of Lincoln Boulevard, where they want to do this. These are earthen levees. There's a little bit of concrete gunite sprayed on both sides, but most of it is soil with a mud bottom, a natural mud bottom, and that's why there are lots of plants that grow there. And I'll show you some pictures in a minute. They also claim that Area A is just dredged soil or fill with no redeeming qualities at that height. And I know Rick and Jonathan and Roy, the biologists and naturalists who spend a lot of time out there, they would completely refute that. Sorry. 5, they claim that Ballona should be open to full tidal seawater year-round, which again is not an accurate premise. And then if you don't believe any of that, they say the Ballona wetlands are dead and dying. And I've heard that from many of the advocates for this repeatedly. And interestingly, some of them are the same people who said that when we were trying to stop Playa Vista. And that was their rationale for why we had to approve Playa Vista, because the wetlands were dead and dying, and Playa Vista would help that with the restoration they were going to do, which they never have done. So, well, they did do a little freshwater marsh on the corner of Lincoln and Jefferson, but that's it. So, again, there already are meandering sloughs and creeks throughout the Ballona Wetlands Ecological Reserve. Maybe not enough, maybe there should be some more, I don't know. But the people, again, who are studying the wildlife say, maybe we should be really careful before we dig in anywhere. And Ballona Creek is actually at an equilibrium as well as Area A. It's nearly 100 years old now, and it's filled with life. And I didn't really understand this until I moved to Playa del Rey in about a year after the acquisition happened. And spending as much time as I do there now, I see the life. Now, not just Roy. Roy is there. Roy's actually always out there showing me something that he's discovering. It's amazing how much is out there. And again, it's just filled with life, and including sometimes sea lions. We've been seeing a number of them lately. And so the circle of life is what I think is really important. And the precautionary principle is our first principle. First, do no harm. Because I think that might be a gopher. A lot of people don't like gophers, but that heron needs that gopher to survive. So you kind of have to put aside your own biases to maybe go back to what Kathy was talking about earlier, the biophilia hypothesis, to really think about how these species all interact. And we also look to some wisdom from Aldo Leopold. Aldo Leopold is known as the father of restoration, of ecological restoration. And he said, to keep every cog and wheel is the first precaution of intelligent tinkering. So if you're going to mess with something, if you take apart a watch, that was what his analogy was, you can't just lose some pieces. You have to know it all goes together. And he also said, this which I think is interesting, the last word in ignorance is the man who says of an animal or plant, well, what good is that? And we kind of hear that way of thinking from some of the people who want to do this project. So I'm going to show you a few of the rare and imperiled species we have out there. We have a lot of them, but I'm going to just show you a few. This is the orchid yellow pincushion. And you can see there's a couple of insects on it. And I think, Jonathan, correct me if I'm wrong, the one on the left, is that special moth that you found?
Yes, it's that moth, its larval is on the...
Right, so this species we didn't even know still existed, and Roy discovered it out at the Ballona Lagoon Marine Preserve when the city was getting ready to do some work out there, and we had been doing some restoration work with the city down the way. And if it weren't for Bill Rosendahl, our former city council member, this would have been gone. And he said, wait a minute, we got to save this. He got out there, got his picture taken with the flower, and made sure that the Argonaut knew about it, and the Argonaut actually did a series of stories on this. And this beautiful little wildflower, turns out we have some at the ecological reserve too, and nobody knew that until after this discovery. And then Jonathan started photographing the incredible number of insects that use this flower. And this moth he sent away to find out about it, and it turned out this is the, now correct me if I'm wrong, it's the southernmost place they even knew it existed. Is that right now?
Oh, that was about the stiletto fly.
That was a different one, okay.
You can see the green plant in the background, that's the pink samberbean. That's the plant that the larva of this moth would be on.
Okay.
I can't even pronounce the scientific name because it's really Albroniel. It's really
Yeah,
fascinating.
it's beautiful. It looks like jewels. So all of these insects have important roles to play, and we don't even know the half of it. Because guess what? When they do these environmental reviews, they hardly ever look at the insects. None of the invertebrates are looked at. And we know a lot about Ballona because in the 1970s, 80s, the Natural History Museum of LA County did a huge study on areas A and B on the insects. And we know that there are, for instance, more than 100 species of ant and ant-like species, native ant and ant-like species out of the wetlands. And that's like, it's just unheard of hardly anywhere in LA for that to be. Okay, so here, this guy's going to help us save this land again. This is the burrowing owl, which has, Jonathan has been really just documenting this like crazy the last few years, and he or she has been coming here regularly. Now we have 2 or 3 in the area. This is the one in Dockweiler. Oh, I thought this was here. Okay, well, he's almost always in the same kind of habitat. So this is a rare owl species, and it is only about this big. And last month at the Audubon walk, we saw him right along the trail. It was just amazing. So this little owl is increasingly, though, losing its habitat. In Southern California, there are hardly any places where you find this owl. And we need to bring it back as a nesting species again, because 50 years ago it was nesting here. Now there are a lot of different levels of protection under different laws, and the great blue heron is a protected species under the state of California's laws. They have a special list of species of special concern. There are about 36 species at Ballona, at the Ecological Reserve, that are on that list, and that means the Coastal Commission, since this is all in the coastal zone, is supposed to treat these species as if they're on the endangered species list, partly because the agencies have not had the time or the resources to put more, or the political will to put more of these species that should be on the endangered species list on those lists. So this was taken in Area C, which is east of Lincoln Boulevard, but still north of Ballona Creek. This is almost exactly where Annenberg wanted to put their big facility. Thankfully, just over a year ago, Annenberg pulled out. I'm very cautious in saying that, though, because they had been getting a lot of bad press, and we're not sure they're completely out, because they're doing some things at Ballona now with photography and some other things, and we'll see, but they're not going to build where this bird needs that habitat. And interestingly, this land, even though Annenberg's not going to be there now, it's still planned to be cleared and grubbed. Take away all the habitat. Why? It's a good question. This is another really amazing species that I've come to grow and love here. This is called the Ballona wildflower, Erysimum suffratensis. And it is what is called a type locality at Ballona, which means when they first discovered it many years ago, this was the main place they went to for it. All the botanists have these places called type localities, and they It's a very important designation they give to it. So this, and it's a beautiful plant that looks like fireworks when it's all blooming, and it's in the sand dune areas. So here's a really interesting photo that Jonathan managed to catch, and there are two endangered species in the same photo. There's a Belly savanna sparrow here in the pickle plant, and then up in the salt pan there's a couple of these terns. So sometimes you can even see them together, amazing. And another, what's called in the state of California, a fully protected species, is one of my very favorites, is the white-tailed kite. And this actually was just written up in a California Supreme Court decision because at the Newhall Ranch development, the Fish and Wildlife Department tried to sort of skirt their duties in protecting fully protected species. So this bird also is not nesting currently in the Ballona Wetlands Ecological Reserve. A few years ago, it was nesting up in some of the trees above the reserve in the residential neighborhood, amazingly. But they hunt here, they come here for the winter. We're not sure if they're nesting somewhere close by, but they're here every winter, and they're beautiful to watch. This is the one that Bill Rosendahl is very famous for imitating. He's done it at City Hall. He's done it at political fundraisers. He loves this bird. It does this really beautiful thing with its wings. And he does it better than anybody. Whoops. Did I just hit the wrong button? I think I did. Oh, there we go. Okay. So this species, another endangered species, the Elsevier blue butterfly, it actually has come back since the land was acquired for the public, and only with the work of community members. No bulldozers, no industrial habitat alteration, the kind of work that we think should be done in terms of genuine restoration. Another species, not endangered, but certainly interesting and important for the ecosystem is the coyote. And the coyote's also come back since the land was acquired. It was not here during Playa Vista's reign for a long time. And this coyote, we have lots of them around. Rick just had a little interaction with one this morning on his way to work. And it's a beautiful, beautiful animal, and very important to keep the mesopredators in check, because those mesopredators, like skunks, possums, foxes, they go after the bird eggs. So if you have too many of them, then ground nesting birds are going to be in trouble. So it's a balance, and it's not easy to manage in a place like this, but here's the problem. Nobody's really managing it here. Nature's kind of doing her best, and we're hoping not to get in the way, but it would be really great if we had some professional managers who are here all the time. And this is a gnatcatcher, right? Okay, I wanted to make sure. The California gnatcatcher, another endangered bird, has also started coming back since the land had been acquired. And it's a beautiful little sound that this bird makes. And we have enough coastal sage habitat that we could get nesting of this bird. They did start nesting in the sand dunes at El Segundo Dunes last year, and we know that they could be brought here with just a little bit more attention and love. And so here, this is the question again. We want to trap and cage these wild animals, and here's where it doesn't make sense to me. I was at the Wildlife Conservation Board hearing, testifying to support the money, more than $130 million from the Wildlife Conservation Board. But that bond money was allocated to acquire the land. So why would we be coming in and caging and trapping the animals? It's like, just doesn't make sense to me. And then, besides all the rare and imperiled species, we also just have a lot of beautiful species out there. And Jonathan, do you know the name of this butterfly? Roy?
Escaping me right now. It's called a white butterfly.
It's a white, beautiful butterfly. Roy's taught me that. I don't have to know all the species names. You just say that it's beautiful. White checker spot? Okay. That's what he said. Another thing that I find really beautiful, if you're here in the mornings, at Ballona, a lot of times we have this wonderful tule fog that is a ground fog that covers much of the land. And I want to know what it does. I don't know of anybody that knows, but I know it's important. I know that this tule fog has some role in the ecosystem, bringing in all this sort of wet stuff. And what happens if you excavate the place and you have it lower in many places and you don't have the tule fog? Because I can tell you on Ballona Creek, which is a lot lower, where they excavated it 100 years ago, there isn't tule fog. It's only on either side. So there's something there that I think is important too. And these are just little things that people don't think about, but they're big things to the ecology, really. And another thing that I know the insect people do know is that it's not good to wipe out pollinators. And hundreds of species of insects would be wiped out if this plan goes forward. And do they come back? Not necessarily. Some may, and many won't. Numerous dragonfly species are also present now. If you go to Jonathan's Flickr site, and there's a little piece of paper back there on the table that tells you how to get there to his site, you will see so many beautiful dragonflies, lots of different colors. And they're there because this is not a tidal wetland. A full tidal wetland doesn't have dragonflies. They just don't survive. Neither do the frogs, by the way. And grasslands are another imperiled habitat type. They're actually considered in the state of California more rare than wetlands now. And the California Department of Fish and Wildlife is supposed to be protecting these grassland areas. They're important for migratory birds, including this one that you can not easily see. Oops. And then more meandering sloughs like this one. This one's south of Culver, also part of the Centinela Slough. And I want you to note the eucalyptus grove in the distance, because that's where the monarch butterfly autumnal roost is, besides the great horned owls that actually have young there every year. So there's a lot going on in this whole ecological reserve that many people never see. So then I want to go back to Area A, the place where they tell you it's all fill and dredge spoils, and show you, like, this alkali heath plant is huge, and it was filled with insects of all kinds when I took this picture. And again, it's got an equilibrium since the 1960s. Now, are there things that can be done? Yes, but there are also things that shouldn't be done, like wiping out this beautiful population of the Lewis evening primrose. Jonathan's really good at making some of these things just pop out, because you might not even notice this plant. In certain times of year, you wouldn't notice it, but when it is starting to grow up, you've really got to keep your eye out for it. But it's an amazing, amazing, beautiful plant, as you can see. And then another rare population in Area A of alkali barley. These native grasses, which there aren't very many of. We've got a lot of non-native grasses, but we've also got some natives. And if you're my botanist wildlife partner, he tells me grasses are very difficult to know the difference between. And so some of these people who aren't even botanists go out there and go, oh, it's all just a bunch of non-native weeds. Well, not necessarily. And then Area A is also a very important place for hawks, herons, and egrets that feed on significant small mammal populations out there. And how I was talking about how so many of the animals live right beneath the surface. When we went out there with the State Coastal Conservancy, who wants to do this project, they were taking everybody on a tour a few years ago, and we were walking, and some of the guys who are in charge of the project are like falling through the soil because there are so many burrows, so many animals live out there. So they didn't quite understand what was happening. But these guys understand. This is where they get their food. So what do we want to see? We're often accused of being said that we don't want to do anything. We just don't want, we're just do-nothings. Is that what they say? We want to do something. And so I want to talk a little bit about some of the things we do want to do. You can see here power lines. There are power lines going all through this place. Removing the electrical power lines and undergrounding them is one of the most important things we could do out there. Not just aesthetically, but birds constantly are harmed by these power lines. Slow and divert the freeway traffic going through Ballona. If I told you how many pictures I have of dead animals that we have constantly are taking pictures of to document out there, you would be shocked. And not only that, but there's actually been a study done by, UC Channel Islands, who they've done a study of all the ecological reserve areas in Southern California, and ours has the highest roadkill area, the highest roadkill percentages, and it's huge. I mean, coyotes, rabbits, birds, constantly. So why should it say 50 miles an hour going through an ecological reserve? And besides that, we have had huge numbers of accidents where people have been killed, about 2 or 3 every year. So it's ridiculous. So just getting the freeway slowed down, electrical power lines out, and close down the gas company storage fields. That would also be a big thing. What else do we want to see? We want to see community-engaged restoration, where just like those El Segundo blue butterflies were brought back, have people get out there, get their hands in the soil, and plant plants that need to be there, take out some of the trash, get rid of things that shouldn't be there, but do it carefully and slowly, because some of the non-native plants are actually important habitat, like the eucalyptus trees where the butterflies roost. So until we understand how it all works, we should be doing it very, very slowly. But this is one of my favorite things. Recovery of species, like the bald eagle. We could bring the bald eagle back. They've done that at Catalina Island. DDT is not in the system anymore, and so we would have to do some things to make it happen, but it would be a great project for high school kids or college kids to help feed the baby bald eagles and get them used to living here and knowing this is their home. Roadrunners, jackrabbits, California quail, Ventura marsh milkfetch, these are all species that were here not very long ago and could be brought back. And there are others, but those we know would not interfere with the ecosystem, but would enhance it. And then there are some nature trails that really should be open, maybe with some special hours due to sensitive species, but the Bill Rosendahl Nature Trail is waiting to happen, in my view. There's a trail owned by the city. It's called Cabora Drive. It goes halfway up the bluffs, all the way from the 405 freeway, across Lincoln, and all the way down to Nicholson. And we think that should be the Bill Rosendahl Nature Trail, and it's owned by the city. We've talked to Mike Bonman about it. He liked the idea. And then nothing ever happened, partly because Mike was new, getting his feet wet and all kinds of things. And I think now that he's running for office again, we should be talking to him about getting that done, because that's something where people could see from a distance. We could maybe even put some scopes out, some of those that they use like for looking at whales. And you can have some benches here and there, but you could have, not doing too much, not coming in and, making it real manicured because it's actually part of the wildlife area, but having a nature trail there. And then there's the South Levee of Ballona Creek. The South Levee, the North Levee is where the bicycle path. The South Levee is really pretty much closed, except Audubon takes tours occasionally. But we think it should be open a little bit more, maybe again with sensitive hours, but there's no reason to have it completely closed. And certainly, we could do it with guided tours. So what's the other thing we want to see? Well, we want to see the National Park Service come in. Because guess what? We've given the state 12 years, and they haven't done a very good job, in my view, of really taking care of the place. And in fact, they've kind of left it to a bunch of other people. All these plans that I mentioned, they weren't even put together by the state agencies that own the land. They were put together by some others. And they kind of promised them, we'll get you some money. And they went along with it. Well, the National Park Service has what's called the National Park Service Organic Act. And what they do is that law governs how they see species, how they how they interact with the land that they are stewards of. And they would never put forward a plan like this, and they would engage the community. And guess what? The National Park Service, it's 100 years this year. Anybody see the Rose Parade and see them throughout the Rose Parade? How exciting. National Park Service was here in its full glory. Well, they want to be involved more in big city areas like this because they understand that if they're going to protect places like Yellowstone and Yosemite, that they've got to interact more with big numbers of people like we have here in Los Angeles. So they kind of like this idea. And in addition, we've talked with Ted Lieu, our Congress member, and he is in the midst right now of putting together legislation that would ask the National Park Service to study the idea of a Los Angeles Coast National Recreation Area. And it would include more than Ballona. It would include this beautiful view from San Pedro here up the coast. And it would include all these wonderful historic sites we have, like the Venice Beach House. We actually even have a Howard Hughes historic site in Playa Vista. There are 3 lighthouses along this stretch of coast. The Park Service loves lighthouses. And so all of those things would be studied in this idea. And hopefully some of the areas we're trying to protect as well, like the Baldwin Hills and Ballona, some of the areas in the marina could qualify, or if we had the National Park Service at least looking at all these things, maybe some of our local officials would be thinking a little bit differently about the decisions they're making. So that's coming very soon, but it's going to take all of us. One of the things we did recently was we met with our Assembly member, Autumn Burke, who the Sierra Club endorsed and helped get elected. I see a few people who did calls for her. And we've asked her to consider putting legislation in and asking the governor to support transferring some of the land at Ballona to the National Park Service. Because even though we would have this idea of a LA Coast National Recreation Area, Ballona couldn't be included. It could be included in the recreation area, but it wouldn't be actually managed by the Park Service unless we get it transferred from the state. So there are some people who really wouldn't want that. All these people who want to do this big project and get a lot of money for it. And there are some waiting in line for that. Some of them already have gotten a lot of money out of that $15 million that I was telling you about. And so there are some that will not want that to happen. So what that means is it's going going to take everybody here and all your friends and neighbors writing letters to Autumn Burke every time you see her, asking her to support that and to say, we really want this land transferred. And, you know, all they have to do is say, look, Governor Brown, do you really want the kind of fight we had to have to save this land the first time? It's going to be World War III out here. Just give it over to the National Park Service. You don't want to have to go through that. That's the best argument I can think of. So now I'm going to just ask, finally, back to, I do have to say, this gas company. I want to make sure you know this. These are some of the facilities that we're talking about. The gas is stored underneath the wetlands and some up in here. And you can see some of the facilities here. We want it, again, to be shut down. And this was just 2.5 years ago when this, but Jeanette and Patricia, who've been working on this issue for a lot of years, they will tell you they have a lot of documentation of other problems that have happened here. But this fire, these off-gassing incidents that have happened, people they forget about them after they've happened. But this is not, it's dangerous actually to have this so close to all these homes. So I want to say thank you to Jonathan Coffin, Mark Evans, who's not here, Rick Pine. Will you two stand up? You guys have they're out there documenting this wildlife all the time, so we really are so grateful to you for that.